What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, my top 5 techniques for summer pond fishing. Summer pond fishing, shore fishing, bank fishing. Today's video, I'm covering my top 5 techniques for the shore-based angler. You know, it's how I grew up, it's how Matt grew up, hoofing it, walking the shorelines. You know, we didn't have boats or float tubes or aluminum boats till later on in fishing careers, but I started hopping the neighbors' fences and fishing ponds, going to the river, fishing creeks, streams, trout fishing. That's all I had available, and I love it, and I still love it today. You know, it just gets me, it brings me back to the roots of fishing. Like I said, as a kid, you know, you leave behind the big fancy bass boats. You guys know that the majority of the fishing we do today is on bass boats. We travel the country, we fish different types of fisheries, but it's all based off techniques that we learned early on when we were just kids, hoofing it, walking the shoreline, and catching a few fish. So today, this video goes out to you guys that are shore-based anglers. Heck, I still shore fish all the time. Out here on the shoreline, my kids, I'm always helping them. Just something that's in my blood, something that I do because I love fishing. So summertime, what are the best techniques if you are fishing from the shore? So let's kind of talk about pond fishing. You know, kind of the two things that I think about when I think about pond fishing. One, accessibility. No, not just the shoreline, but are you legally allowed to be there? So if you guys are fishing people's ponds or neighbors' ponds, make sure you have permission. As an ex-game warden, make sure you have written permission. That way, if you do get checked or someone calls on you for trespassing, you have proof right there that you can legally be there and you won't have any issues. But two, shoreline accessibility, right? A lot of the ponds that I grew up fishing, I had to take like a machete or something that I could kind of weed whack and make my way into the shoreline so I could get access to casts. Versus, let's say, a golf course pond, which is highly manicured. It's landscaped. You can pretty much walk the entire shoreline, and you don't have to worry about having to cut your way, bushwhack and cut your way into a casting location. And then grass. So accessibility and then grass. A lot of the ponds that I grew up fishing in the summertime were completely chocked full of grass. Now on the flip side, some of you guys might be fishing ponds that are deeper, clearer water, maybe have big dams. So some of these baits are gonna come into play depending on the type of accessibility you have and if you have lots and lots of grass. So let's get into the techniques. So these techniques are in no particular order, but I'm gonna start out with my favorite. And like I said, it all depends on grass, but my #1 technique for summertime pond fishing or bank fishing is going to be some kind of topwater. Either a traditional walking frog, a popping frog, or a little Demiki D-pop, a little popper if you don't have a lot of grass. Now, the reason that I have a frog and a popper is just that, grass. If you are fishing a pond that is chock full or just socked in with grass, you can't get away with throwing treble hooks. If you can, fishing along the grass lines, fishing those little shade pockets next to laydowns, a popper is a must. Now you guys know that Matt and I are both tackle junkies. We spent a lot of money buying tackle through the decades, but as a shore-based angler, as a pond fisherman, you don't have to show up to the local pond with the latest and greatest gear, the most expensive whatever, right? A lot of times as we're fishing, we get hung up out there, we can't go get it. So in this video, a lot of it's gonna be kind of budget-based baits. Baits that still work, baits that we still fish today, but it's not gonna break the bank if you get hung up out there and have to break off. So let's talk about the popper. That Damiki D pop is probably my third or fourth popper in my lineup. It's a popper that works great. You guys know that I love the World Pop and the Pop Max, the Mega Bass. Those are pretty expensive poppers. This guy doesn't break the bank, has a great walk and a great sound, and has caught a ton of fish for myself and my kids. So that guy right there. Now, where am I targeting with this? Again, I show up to that pond, I can visibly see there's a ton of grass on the surface, but there's lanes or there's shade pockets or there's areas that are a little bit deeper that don't have surface grass. That's where I throw this alongside or over the top. Now, what's cool about this popper is you can walk it. Bloop, 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 bloop. Get it going side to side or just bloop, let it sit. The cool thing about pond fishing, for the most part, the fish aren't nearly as pressured as, you know, let's say a lake that has several tournaments a week, right? Hundreds of boats on it per week. You can sneak in quietly, you can sneak out quietly, you can make little casts that's really hard to do. Maybe if you're in a boat or a kayak or something like that from the shore, you can make little pitches around the shade lines, around the grass lines, and work those baits and present them a different angle and a different way than someone that's out on the water casting to shoreline can do. But that little guy right there, a popper. Topwater is my favorite way to catch them in the summer. Just having those visual bites, those visual explosions are, they're great. That's my favorite thing growing up, was pond fishing and getting those big topwater blowups, okay? Now, for the most part, these ponds, especially in the summer, are going to have a lot of grass. So I added 2 poppin' frogs in there for you. That's a little Spro poppin' frog and the little Jackal Gavacha. You can see the face on there. Again, you're gonna throw straight braid on these. The benefit of throwing the straight braid, when you hook those fish and they get down in that stuff, down that muck, that grass, whatever it may be, with that straight braid, you can get those fish out and you don't have to worry about bending the hooks out like you would on the popper. You fish this the same locations that you would the popper. Again, you're just getting the benefit of weedless and power. Power in the hooks, power in the hook set, power in the braid. If you do have a little bit of, say there's a little bit of space between the surface and the grass, or the grass is isolated grass patches or sparse grass, that's when I go with that traditional walking frog. Again, you can cover more water, you can work it really fast, you can pop it, twitch, 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 pop it, let it sit. Those fish are gonna come unglued for it. Now, like I said, if you have a ton of grass and you can't get away with a popper, kind of do that 1-2 punch with the poppin' frog, because sometimes they will eat a poppin' frog when they won't eat a walking frog. Again, you can walk these frogs as well, but they're a little bit more finessey, a little bit more slender of a body. And again, we're not always catching giants in ponds, so you might have 12 inchers trying to eat this thing. You might be better off going with a smaller, more slender poppin' frog. Now, before we go completely finesse or slower presentations, I have one more technique for you. Well, kind of 2 techniques. It depends on the fishery that you're fishing. So my number 2 bait that I'm gonna throw on a pond is some kind of chatterbait. Now, you guys know that we love the jackhammer chatterbait. It is hands down the best chatterbait on the market, but it is pricey. It's up there 15, 17, 18 bucks a pop. Again, you don't need that when you're pond fishing. This little guy right here, this is the Z-Man, the Mini Max. A little bit smaller than your traditional bladed jig or chatterbait, but it has a really stout hook on it. I have a Big Bite Baits, that's a 3.8 bluegill colored swim bait on there, and you'll see a lot of the colors I talk about or that I show are gonna have bluegill kind of esque patterns to them, and that's because the majority of ponds I fished growing up, the majority of ponds I've seen or been to, the primary forage is bluegill. So if you have a pond that maybe has gizzards or different types of shad or whatever, you'll have to adjust your colors accordingly. But for the most part, even with my frogs, I'm going bluegill patterns or whites or blacks. On my chatterbaits, I'm going bluegill patterns, okay? That is the Mini Max, a really stout hook, doesn't break the bank, and it is lights out. It's lights out anywhere, but especially in ponds. Now, again, that same situation, you might be on a pond that's chock full of grass and you need to throw something that's a little bit more weedless that doesn't have that exposed hook. I'm giving you an alternative. Go with some kind of weedless swim bait. Again, there's that Big Bite swim bait. I have a flashy swimmer on there with that gold Colorado blade. Again, you're trying to mimic bluegill. Those bass are eating bluegill in those ponds. And I have the little Demiki armor shad in there. Again, a little bit smaller profile, but this is weedless, okay? I have it skin hooked. So it's fairly weedless, so you can throw this thing out, you can swim it just above the grass if it's not on the surface. You can pick your grass lane, you can see it. Again, your casts, depending on your accessibility, are gonna be limited, right? With that chatterbait, you might only get a couple casts to kind of cut that piece of pie when you're making those casts. But something like this, you can pick those grass lines on top of the grass line. You can fish it along the shoreline edge, whip a cast out along parallel, maybe under a laydown. But again, you don't have to worry about getting hung up because you are weedless. And then again, you have that real stout hook. You can jack them and get those fish to shore. Again, that's another issue. Once you hook a fish, how do you get them up through the cattails? How do you get them up through the reeds? Whatever it may be, that's something that you have to think about. So having a nice stout hook like that flashy swimmer does is a must. So that is my number 2, the reaction bait. Like I said, that chatterbait or some kind of weedless swim bait. You can throw the flashy swimmer or you can just throw the beast hook, totally up to you. I will link both down below in the video description. All right, now that we're kind of done with the topwater and say the reaction side of this, now let's talk about a little bit slower fishing. So say you come up to the shoreline and you have a little bit of a lane, right? You have this lane to make your cast through. You're gonna have to pick it apart, fish it slow, pick it apart, fish it slow. You're gonna fish slow and really pick around, pick through that area that you have to fish, because you can't jump. If you're on a shoreline like this, you won't be able to jump from spot to spot to spot, right? If you're on open shoreline pond, you can make all the casts in the world, all the different angles. But if you're in an angle-less spot like this, it makes it a little bit tougher. So that's where the slow fishing really comes into play. Now, I picked 3 styles of baits for you. And again, no particular order, but I will go with this guy first because it can be fished slow, or it could be fished kind of fast or erratic, kind of like those reaction baits. But this guy right here, the Zoom Super Fluke, okay? Again, I have that rigged weedless. I have that rigged on a 4/0. This is actually a VMC. This is a red line hook. I got it right here for you. The reason I went with this hook right here, it's super universal. The size, it can be fished on the next 2 other techniques that I'm gonna show you. But that Zoom Super Fluke, a weedless jerk bait. So you can fish it real fast on top, get that thing skipping like a bait fish or a bluegill skipping out of the water, or you have those visible grass lines, those shade lines, you fire it out there, you let it fall, pop it, let it fall. It's gonna fall like a dying bait fish. Again, you're gonna fish it on slack line. You're gonna watch that bow in your line and it's gonna go tunk, reel down, and you're gonna jack them. I like to throw braid to leader on all of these besides the frog, but it's really important to watch your line, your slack line, as this thing is falling if you're fishing it slow. Again, I'm just rigging it back into itself. Let me do it straight for you. Back into itself, and then just skin hooking it so that it's still fairly weedless, but when I set the hook, that thing comes through. So the fluke is a very unique bait because it can be fished fast, it can be fished slow, and fish just come unglued for it. So again, if you're in that grass filled pond, that fluke, you throw it out there, you can skip it, get that thing going. Like I said, fish it like a topwater up on the surface, or you can fish it, you can even add like a little nail weight or a tungsten weight, and get it down through the grass, pop it up. But you can fish it a lot of different ways. The slow fishing, fire it out there along that grass line and let it fall. It's just gonna do that slow, spinning, spiraling kind of death spiral, and the fish just heat it up. But the Zoom Super Fluke is a must. Next one for you. I'm gonna go with a Texas rigged creature bait, okay? I really like, this is the Destroyer. Comes in the Destroyer, comes in the Baby Destroyer, a little bit smaller presentation, but I like a creature bait that has a lot of appendages and a lot of movement. Again, these ponds are fairly small, or they're at least smaller than a lake, obviously, right? The water's gonna be warmer, those fish are gonna be active. Having a bait with a lot of movement, again, you're gonna put a 1/4 ounce or a 3/16 ounce bullet weight in front of it. You're gonna rig it, Texas rig it, just like you would that Super Fluke. Again, you got that thing skin hooked. It is fairly weedless. You put that nail weight or the bullet weight on there. You can flip this around from shoreline. You can find those shade pockets. You can cast out, let it fall. It's gonna fall down. All these appendages are gonna be moving. All that action, and it is my opinion, that's what bring those fish in. They're curious, they see it, that movement, and they come unglued for it. But that guy right there, the Destroyer or the Baby Destroyer, there's a lot of different creature style baits on the market. But again, I just have a ton of success on this. Brush hog or a baby brush hog works great as well. Again, we're not trying to break the bank, but a pack of these and a pack of hooks will catch you a ton of fish. Now the Texas rig, it can be rigged so many different ways, you know, with so many different baits. Like I said, I like the creature bait. If you're not a creature bait style of guy, you can go with a curly tail worm, rig it the same exact way. Again, braid to leader, set those hooks hard and get those fish out of that grass, out of that stuff. But that guy right there is a must, okay? We talked about the Texas rigged baits, either the worm or the creature bait. Now, last but not least, my number 5 technique is this guy right here, a Senko. Now, you guys know that we love the Senko. Green pumpkin, black flake, 297 color. That is a technique. It is a bait. It is a presentation that'll catch fish no matter what creek, pond, lake, river you're in around the country. Fish of all sorts of species love a Senko. Now, we've done tons of underwater footage. It's really hard to find a bait that mimics that Senko movement, especially wacky rigged. But again, we're talking money and budget. These guys can get a little pricey if you start catching a bunch of 12-inch fish that are just shredding your baits. Then you can go with the Yum Dinger. Fairly inexpensive. It's a lot more buoyant, doesn't fall nearly as quickly. But again, my number 1 is gonna be the Senko, and it's gonna be rigged, Texas rig, okay? Again, take that same 4/0 hook. Show you guys how to rig this real quick. And on a Senko, we've talked about this through years, but if you rotate this, you'll notice that the Senko has a natural kind of bend to it right here. See that tail kind of bending out? That's what you want rigged down. Now, 9 times out of 10, when I'm fishing a Senko in a pond, I'm rigging it Texas rig. I'm not rigging it wacky rigged because I want it to be fairly weedless, okay? And I actually leave a little bit of this hook in the bait. I don't expose it. I don't push the hook through just because as you catch more fish, it's gonna kind of tear that up, and then you can kind of push it through and then skin hook it. But that guy right there, again, that's the 4/0. If you're just fishing a Senko and you're not gonna be fishing the other stuff, you can get away with a 3/0. But again, a straight Texas rigged stick bait is a must. The way it falls, it just falls so subtly. It's not intrusive. Again, that 297 color, that green pumpkin, black flake, it's just a fish catcher, tried and true, all across the country, all different types of bodies of water. But you fire this thing out and you just let it fall. Again, you're gonna watch your line, your slack line. Doop. A lot of times in ponds, you know, the fish, especially if there's hardly any pressure, the fish will just grab it and take off. So you'll be watching your slack line, and all of a sudden it just takes off. It's just so much fun. But guys, shore fishing, pond fishing, it's in my roots of bass fishing. You know, as a kid, I didn't grow up with a parents that had a boat. You know, I've been blessed, Matt's been blessed that we get to fish out of some of the nicest equipment, use the nicest equipment. But it's taken decades. And when I say decades, I mean decades. Because I can remember when I was 4 years old walking to the neighbor's pond, and all I had was an ugly stick, a hula popper, a jitterbug, and probably a banjo minnow. And I was addicted to fishing. You know, anytime I could get out, it was what I wanted to do. Eventually, as I became a teenager, I got a float tube and then a 12-foot aluminum boat, and then a little bit bigger bass tracker, and then an old champion. So just kind of worked our way up through it. So if you guys are shore-based or shore-bound right now, there's a lot of ways to get yourself out on the water. I love shore fishing. I love bank fishing, but I also love float tubes and aluminum boats and kayaks. I mean, heck, kayaks these days, there are some crazy fishing kayaks in the market that you can drive to a pond or you can drag to the pond and get yourself off of the shore. But guys, these 5 techniques, doesn't matter where you are in the country, one of these work. You know, like I said, I love that Topwater. I love throwing a frog. I love throwing a popper. If you can't get them on top, go with that finesse stuff. Go with that chatterbait or that weedless swim bait, and you guys will have success the next time you go hoofing it out to the pond or from the shore. Guys, as always, thank you for watching. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. We'll try to get to those as soon as possible. But like I said, as always, we appreciate you. Thanks for watching. If you like this video or you're a shore-based angler, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.